All right, look, we got the survivors here. Yeah. We've been learning a lot of New Zealand colloquialisms. I learned, and I'm not sure that this is appropriate. When you want somebody to hurry up, get it done, rattle your dags.
Is that appropriate? Okay. I don't know. Yeah.
That's on film.
Those Americans, I don't know.
Yeah, so we've been learning some good ones. People, and the one that I'm going to use back home is sweet as. Sweet as, bro. Yeah. That's the one I want to pick up. All right, so this is the last one. This is a little bit different for us. It's a newer talk. We've actually never done a talk together, so this is brand new to us. And there's a growing trend in apologetics to train our children and our students in apologetics. And so this talk is developing out of that growing trend. You know, we're trying to get our students to encounter some of these arguments before they're faced with some of these questions that they cannot answer. And also, we're trying to encourage students to learn about the issues that are out there, because they live in a world in which there's so much information that is contrary to the basic Christian beliefs. Right? And they receive so much information about Christianity that is false. And so it's an important practice to train them up in apologetics. But one of the things that we can't ignore is that we can't just like throw apologetics into the home. Like, hey, we're going to just start studying apologetics and think that it'll magically change their lives. We actually have to create an environment for this in the home. To be effective in discussing and communicating the defense of the Christian faith in our homes, we actually have to be intentional in creating that environment that is ripe for discussion on these matters. So that's what this talk developed out of our concern that, you know, we can't just say, hey, get your kids apologetics and they'll do wonderful and they won't leave the faith. You got to balance that with creating this environment in the household. So there's a lot more going on than just making sure you have the right Bible study or the right apologetics resource in the home. And, you know, though there's a lot of reasons for why our kids will step away from the faith, not all of them are because kids didn't have reasonable answers. So what my family is here to do today, some of the reasons is because that environment wasn't created in the home. And we've seen kids who came from homes where apologetics was just, you know, they were talking about it all the time, but the kids still walked away from the faith. So originally, my daughter and I wanted to combat that. We wanted to say, like, here's a more effective manner towards developing this discussion. So what we're going to do here is that we're going to talk to you out of our own personal experience about what was going on in our home. Obviously, what we have going on in our house is not a one-size-fits-all for everybody, but we can only talk to you out of our own experience. So we're going to share some things with you about how you can encourage a defense of the faith in the home based on our own family experiences. Let me introduce you to the third member of our family who is not here today. She is so upset she's not here. I'm going the wrong direction. No, I'm not doing competing worldviews.
I'm Mark Powell, and I'm here this...
Oh, wait. I can give this talk if you want me to. Hey, what do you believe? Yeah, what do you guys believe in? Oh, there we are. Okay, so there's the third member of our family. She's so upset that she wasn't able to come and do this talk that she's a school teacher and school wasn't out yet, and so that she had dreams that she took the rest of her sick days. Nightmares. She took the rest of her sick days and just got on a plane and came out here. Like, I'm done. I'm going to New Zealand. So that's our family. That's Emily. So you'll hear from Emily. She did do some videos for you that we're going to include in this session. Okay, so we all look so sweet and nice, but really we're a bit more like this. Yeah, that's a bit more spot on. All right, so our points today in this last session is how can we cultivate this environment in the home? And from our own experience, we're going to give you these three that you need to cultivate interest, cultivate learning, and cultivate praxis to encourage a defense of the faith. All right. So in each point, I'll be using a little bit of scripture with you as backing for each of these. And you're going to hear from Emily, and you're going to hear from Roger. And hopefully we'll have a good time. We'll see how this goes. This is our third time doing this, and it's never the same. All right. So the first one is to cultivate interest. Philippians 2, 1 through 4 says that Paul's speaking to the church at Philippi, and he says, "Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness, if any compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others." So here, as the Baker New Testament commentary says, Paul's emphasizing the necessity of oneness among the brothers and sisters, a quality that's only possible when there is true lowliness of mind and helpfulness of disposition. So here, apparently, you have the Philippian church that they have become Christians, and they're reporting all these great experiences, these spiritual experiences, but they're lacking fruit in one area that Paul's addressing. The fruit that they're lacking is on the home front, in their home church. And apparently, it's how they're treating one another and how they're viewing one another. Now, while Paul's not directly addressing our Christian homes, he's addressing our home, our church home, which is made up of our individual Christian homes. So we're going to extrapolate that out to our individual Christian homes. The church is made up of the individual Christian families. And so his call for like-mindedness, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind, applies to brothers and sisters in Christ in our homes. And that means any brothers and sisters in Christ, even parent to child or child to parent. So we need to cultivate an environment of like-mindedness, and that's the difficulty, right? Because think of how different some of your family members are from you. They're very different, and sometimes it feels like you don't have any commonality whatsoever. And in fact, this view of like people don't understand me and my family, I'm different, this sort of alienated view is the view that's most often pushed in the culture through our media, through television, movies, music, our art. What we constantly see portrayed is that the parent just doesn't get me, right? I'm different. They just don't get me. Or the parent will see the child as just being childish. Like, when will they grow up? Like, you'll learn someday, right? That's not developing a spirit of like-mindedness. When you look at what Paul's saying about our Christian home, in humility, we're supposed to value others above ourselves. That's really tough when you've seen what your kids have done over the years, right? And it's tough for the kids when they see what their parents, what we've done over the years, when they see how the parents have acted, sometimes out of selfishness and not out of love, not putting others above themselves. So Paul is saying that we need to not only value others as above ourselves, which is very countercultural, specifically in the home, that seems very counterculture. But we're also not just supposed to look to our own interest, but we're supposed to look to the interest of others. It's not supposed to be a feigned or forced interest, but something that's genuine. We're actually supposed to develop an interest in the other people in the home. So, relating this over to our apologetic endeavor, if I desire for my family to be interested in what I'm doing, like apologetics, or what I'm interested in, like if I want to talk about the deep things of God, I actually have to reciprocate that in their lives. I have to be interested in where they're already at and what they're already interested in, right? That has to be reciprocated. So I asked my daughter some things about this, and I want to share that with you. So hopefully we'll see how this goes. We're going to try a video. How did our taking a genuine interest in your life affect your view of God?
For me, it was a very real and tangible evidence of who God really is. Before he, to me, was just this perfect being who was untouchable and unknowable, omnipotent, omniscient, etc. But when my parents really started taking an interest in me, I got to see what it's like between God and the people he loves. And it's very interesting that he set up this family structure the way he did, because the parents are supposed to be that demonstration of God's love for us, but it's not very often we get to see that. And when my parents started getting into apologetics, I started to see their interest in me even when I was failing and even when I was doing things the wrong way, and that love of God reflected in their relationship with me.
How did my interest in apologetics affect your interest in apologetics?
Well, so before my mother, your interest, was introduced to my life, I had no idea what apologetics was. I didn't even know what that word was or what it meant. And when you decided to go get a degree in this, I was very interested in what that actually was because I'd never heard of it. So to me, this new and interesting subject that you were getting into, I wanted to know more about it. And then you would come home and you would start talking science, you would start talking philosophy, religion, history, literature, and I love all of those things, and anything that puts them together was really cool to me because I'm a nerd. But you would just talk and talk and talk about these like there was no tomorrow, and you're passionate about it. And occasionally it would get exhausting, but you were passionate about it, and that made me passionate about it. Whether or not I wanted to sit and listen for 3 hours a night, I would get something from that. And then I would want to research it.
Yeah, I actually asked, I said, 3 hours? Would I talk really for 3 hours a night? And he said, yes. you get off on these arguments or these things that you're super excited about. All right, so Roger, we heard from Emily about that developing sort of an interest in each other and sort of a like-mindedness. What kinds of things were we doing in the home? So what actual things were we doing that demonstrated our intentional cultivation of like-mindedness?
Right. Well, I think we took a real interest in each other and what each other was doing. Emily kind of alluded to that. But some things that we did that were practical is I have a theological training, so all my stuff that I'm approaching from are Bible and history and whatnot. So I'd bring that into the conversation, which fit pretty naturally with what Mary Jo was talking about with apologetics. Emily's really big into literature, like she alluded to. So we would see where the intersection of those things were. But things that I would bring into the conversations would just be my history of theology. And so I'd see how that would naturally fit with what we were doing.
Yeah, and some other things we would do, like some practical things. That's right, yeah. Practical things would be like when Emily was reading books in school for her classes, like for English, sometimes she loves literature, but sometimes kids don't. And she would be like, oh, we're reading Jane Eyre or whatever. And maybe I wouldn't necessarily pick up Jane Eyre to read on my own, which I actually like it, but I would say, hey, why don't I read that too? Like, why don't I read what you're reading in school? And that way, when we would come to the table for dinner, Emily and I could talk about the book she's reading, which normally she'd get whatever the teacher wants her to get out of it. But now she's getting whatever apologetics themes that I see in there, whatever theological themes. So being older and having studied these things more, I go with what she's already doing, and I'm able to draw from that to make some arguments and to help her get a bigger picture for what she's reading. We also took a lot of interest in her friends and in what they were interested in. They were all music people, so we got interested in band. I don't know if you guys have band like we do with just all the instruments and no strings. We have that in the States, and so they were all in band, so we would show up and be a part of that. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah. We actually became the house in the teenage years where the kids wanted to go and just be in a safe place. And that was fun because I remember growing up, my parents are divorced, and I had a home that I went to that was a safe place. And it was always fun. You'd see, 8, 12, 20 teenagers at one home, and we'd eat all their food, and they'd have to go out and get groceries. But that was a safe place to be, and the mom and the dad were such influencers. And it was kind of surreal to see this start to develop at our house where we were a safe place. Anything could be asked. You could be an atheist. You could be Roman Catholic. You could be Protestant, evangelical, be nothing. And just come to our house and just feel free to ask any question. That was fun. Yeah. And we made our house available to these students.
I think that you, being a pastor, you have like sort of a shepherding heart. And so you're always interested in people. And you are always asking the kids, what are you doing? How's it going? What's going on in your life? You know, so these are like basic things. I mean, here we are talking about, well, we got to teach them apologetics. Yes, but you also have to earn the trust to be able to lay down those apologetics arguments. And he is way better than I am about being interested in people's lives. I actually have to remind myself to do that, right? I have to remind myself to get interested in the other person. And so I think that was one of the things that you did practically to really help the kids open up. Okay, so we need to, an important part of encouraging defense of the faith in our homes is to cultivate a genuine interest in each other. That lays the foundation to have that trust. But we also need to cultivate a love of learning. So in Proverbs, actually, the book of Proverbs is full of commands regarding learning and specifically about God. Proverbs will frequently describe a person who doesn't want to understand or learn as a fool. Like Proverbs 26, if you just want to get smacked around a little bit about learning and understanding, Proverbs 26 is pretty good for that. But the one that I want to use is Proverbs 4, 6 through 7. I might actually back up a little bit here. Here you go. You can hold that. So Proverbs 4 says, starting in verse 5, get wisdom, get insight. Do not forget and do not turn away from the words of my mouth. Verse 6, do not forsake her. That's wisdom. And she will keep you. Love her and she will guard you. And then verse 7, the beginning of wisdom is this. Get wisdom. Other translations say, get an understanding. And whatever you get insight. So some of the translations say, though it costs you everything you have, get an understanding, get wisdom. I mean, learning in the Christian faith is supposed to be top. It's a top priority for us to know who it is we profess. I know I'm preaching to the choir because you're all at an apologetics conference, but listen to how it goes on. Prize her and she will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her. She will place on your head a graceful garland. She will bestow on you a beautiful crown. I mean, wisdom is obviously important here in the scripture. And this seems to be a point that too many Christians seem to miss, right? Learning is a priority for a follower of Christ. The word that we use for followers of Christ is disciple, right? And the word disciple implies you are the student of a discipler, a teacher. It also implies that you have a discipline. In this case, it's that learning about God. But too many Christians do not have an authentic love of learning. They're not disciples. So how or why they picked up this ill regard for learning has multiple reasons, and we're not going to go into that. But what concerns us is what apathy does to our Christian relationships in the home. And specifically, what apathy does regarding apologetics or being able to make a case for why we believe, or even being interested in Christianity at all. If the parent isn't interested in learning, she's going to pass that trait along to her child by her model. We have a saying in the United States that goes, more is caught than taught. Right? More is caught than taught. So children pick up our attitude towards learning for good or for ill. So many surveys in the United States show that students are leaving the church when they leave their parents' home. So many. And I believe it's not just because they didn't have answers. That's part of it. That Christians weren't willing to answer their hard questions. But another part of it is that we have this twisted model of disciple. That's part of the problem. We aren't actually lovers of learning, and that's affecting our students for ill. All right. So let's go back to Emily and see what she has to say on this. What did you see going on in our home that impacted your attitude towards learning about God, either for good or for ill?
Absolutely. When I was younger, learning about God wasn't really a priority. It was, let's learn about religion and about what it takes to be a good Christian. So even when I was younger, I was picking up on those inconsistencies in the faith. I wouldn't have been able to say that, but looking back, I knew that there was something wrong, even as a 5, 6-year-old child. And then there was this huge difference when my mother got into this apologetics program at Biola, and she started really looking into her faith and what it really meant to be a Christian and why it was actually true. And what I saw was not only a change in her, but in a change in her relationship with me. We didn't really get into fights anymore. She started studying logic, and so our fights became more logical because she was more logical, which allowed me to take my emotion out of the situation and just handle the conflict that was at hand. It changed her relationship with me and with my dad. There used to be a lot of very passionate screaming matches between both of them. And once they started really getting into the logic of God, there was a huge change in how they handled conflict with each other and with me.
How can adults in your life help cultivate a love of learning about God?
First of all, they can have a real love of learning about God in their lives. They can really get into some deep theology and to some things outside of just the Bible. Though the Bible's a wonderful resource, they can go study science and God or philosophy and God and show how that all relates back to who God is, and present that in a very scholastic but still emotionally relevant way to the younger members of society. For me, it's that, is this still academically relevant? And why is it? And if you can present that to me in that way, I will take you more seriously.
All right, so Emily and I in our logical arguments, that's actually true. One time Emily and I were in the foyer of the church, and she said something that to me like triggered a response of, okay, wait a minute, that sounded kind of snarky and mean. So what did you mean? What did you mean by that? And I actually asked her, what did you mean by that? Like I taught you guys to do. And she said, I meant blah, 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 blah. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I know what you meant by that. But I thought, oh no, I have to actually hold myself accountable to what I say. Like, I can't jump into her mind and assume what she's thinking. I also don't have any reason to think that she's telling me a lie at the moment. So now I have to go, I have to trust her. So I'd say, okay, well, see, this is how I took it. This is what I thought you were saying. She was, no, that's not what I was saying. It went on like this for a little bit. And there was a church member that had come by. It was a friend of mine. And she had stopped and she was watching us. And when we were done, she goes, whoa, wait a minute. Were you guys just having an argument? And I said, yeah. And she goes, that was weird. And I said, yeah, sometimes just to live up to the cultural expectations, Emily and I have to go home and just slam doors and say things like, you just love me too much or something, like, I can't believe how sacrificial you are. Wham! This is the culture that it created between us, is that we can work things out. We can actually work things out. But she kind of moved into praxis. So I'm going to ask you, I'm not going into praxis yet, but I'm going to ask you, what was your contribution in the home to developing a love of learning?
Apparently I was kind of a little bit of the issue, the problem. I was coming across as kind of a get this done because I say so type personality. And I had no idea that was my personality until we had a few logical arguments. And we'll put it that way. But what I started to learn as we went through is that I was needing to be more transformational versus transactional. And you might have heard your pastors talk about this. When we look at people as a means to get things done, that's transactional, and you're just using the person in front of you. If you look at somebody in front of you and say, I want to develop them as a person, that's transformational. And so you're helping them to be formed in Christ. You're doing it in a Christian way. They're doing it in a Christian way. So what I brought to the house for apologetics was the way that I approached Emily, or the way that I approached Mary Jo as my wife. I had to be a little bit more understanding of how they were receiving me. And so as we talk apologetics, as we implement that into our lives, I was having to be more transformational, whereas before I was not so much that way.
So do you think that when you were being transactional, he doesn't know what I'm going to ask him, that when you were being transactional, do you think that was shutting down learning?
Oh, yeah.
So it was making her a little bit more like, I don't really have time for learning about God, and it's just to please my dad, and this is not really my thing. But are you saying when you became more transformational, that it was more invitational to her, that it cultivated in her more of a love for what we were all engaging with learning? Okay, yeah, that's kind of one of the things I saw as we.
Speaker, not the speaker.
Let me coax it out of you, honey. Winky, winky. No, I mean, we haven't had this particular conversation in this talk yet. So, yeah, I think one of the things in cultivating a love of learning, again, it's not just about having the right Bible study, right? It's about how are we engaging with our children, and what kind of environment are you providing? And if it's transactional, like if you study this, you'll get a good reward, rather than, or you'll get to stay up later or whatever. So it's all like transactional. That's not bad, but it is still transactional. They need to see some transformation. Like they're allowed to grow. They're allowed to become Christ-like. They need to see some wiggle room for them to learn, right? And so that we're not shutting down learning. Emily also said in another video she did that we didn't put up there that we have to consider. I don't know if it's like this in New Zealand, but in the States, we just push so much learning on them in a day. She said that sometimes, especially after college, university, she gets tired. Like she just doesn't want to learn anything else. Like she's done. And she gets into this attitude of, I deserve a break. And so just going to church and learning more and having these discussions isn't so exciting to her. So we really have to be intentional about being creative with how we're engaging them in these arguments. And I thought Brendan, if you were in Brendan Malone's, about how we can use movies and then the books that she was reading, things like that. Where are they already at, and what can you use creatively to draw them in so that the learning feels more natural and fun rather than like you lecturing them or like we have to do this because we're Christian. Okay, so I think that's something we're saying there. Did you want to add anything?
Sure, yeah, and since we're talking about movies and whatnot, my model of growing up was you go to school, you come home, mom and dad have already put the TV on, and that's going to remain on for the next 5-6 hours. So that was my model going into my 20s at university and so forth, because, you put in a long day, you want to come home and just sit down and do absolutely nothing. That has its place. I mean, we like to binge on Netflix from time to time and just chill and do absolutely nothing, but I did have to change in my life something, because I would come home and just sit and do that. So what I had to intentionally do was just take out TV every single night. So when you hear Emily say, come home and talk about this for 3 hours, well, where did that 3 hours come from? That 3 hours came from the fact that time was now freed up to talk about apologetics or theology or philosophy, because we didn't have the TV on the whole time. That just became a vice for me, and something that I had to break the cycle in and just allow my family to grow in a different way instead of just doing the brain drain in front of a TV every single night.
Yeah, thanks. So encouraging defense of the faith in the home needs a cultivation of interest, but also of learning. And then finally, we need to cultivate praxis. Okay, so praxis being the practice of your beliefs or practice of what you profess. And Emily started getting into this a little bit with what she was saying, but let me read to you from James 1, 22 through 26. James tells us, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in the mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. And listen to this admonition. Those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. Boy, I wonder how many Christian kids pick up on that, because their parents don't have a tight rein on their tongue, right? So they get that impression that their parents' religion is worthless, that they don't really believe it. So James is addressing the circumstance of those who take in the word of God passively without regard for what they should do with the information. And the Holman New Testament commentary says, too often Christians view a sermon as an interesting moral or theological lecture. We need to do something rather than just sitting and listening. So with regards to our current subject, we mustn't just go to church, hear a sermon, or go to a conference and hear an argument, and then forget to implement and translate these truths into our lives. And that means in front of our families. Oh, that's tough. I have to begin implementing the truths we are learning when it comes to how we handle our own family members. So our families actually should be the first place or the first people who can see that we actually believe what we profess to believe, what we say we believe. So in my case, before I studied apologetics, my Christianity used to look like a secular life with the addition of church, some Bibles around the house, and a lack of swearing. That's pretty much what it looked like. There was a little bit deeper.
A little lack of swearing.
Just a little. The Southern Baptists might hear that.
Don't tell them, no.
So yeah, it looked kind of like a atheist life with just a little bit of religion on the top. And, I wasn't concerned really with demonstrating the reality of God in my life. Christianity was sort of something we did. It wasn't daily transforming who I was. Okay? It wasn't transforming who I was. So I wasn't taking the Word of God into action. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I had doubt about God at that time. I wasn't really sure. I wasn't really certain that God was real and that he was who he said he was and that he was able to be trusted. Right? So when I started studying apologetics, that changed that. But before I did, because I wasn't demonstrating the reality of God, and Emily's going to say something about this, but because I was coming home and acting like the world, Emily thought that I was petty. And she'll tell you about that. And she's right. It's within my own personality to be impatient. I'm very impatient because I think quickly and I process fast. And so I want you to be where I am. I'm already 5 steps ahead and I've seen 5 outcomes of this conversation. I want you to be there. And so I'm impatient with people. I'm also selfish. And so when I was, when I have doubt about God and I'm not trusting him, all of that personality is just coming out on everybody around me, right? Because I have no concerted, no reason for why I need to stop doing that. Because I'm not even sure if I should trust God or that he's real. So this was a problem. If I hadn't allowed God to change my attitudes and actions, I studied apologetics and I came to the point where I believed he was real, but then I had to allow him to change my heart. If I hadn't allowed that, I imagine Emily would have quite honestly had enough of my double-mindedness and my hypocrisy by her senior year of high school. I wasn't a bad mom, so don't get me wrong. I was just an average mom. I was what I would say was a typical American mom. We have this saying in America, if mama ain't happy, nobody's happy. And I was a good example of that. And now I tell people, oh, that is so not right. If mama ain't happy, she better have a righteous reason she ain't happy. She can't just go around spreading that around on everybody and expect them to succumb to her whim, because that's demonstrating pettiness. And that's exactly what I was doing. And if I hadn't changed that, I realized that I was demonstrating in my life that God was petty. Because Emily's first views, where are kids developing their views of God? Through the family relationships. That's their first encounter with their view of God. So I can imagine she would have developed that God was petty, that he angered easily, that he didn't really care about her, that she was just supposed to keep a checklist and do the right things. So we really got to take this point to heart. If we want people to really dig into the meat of Christianity, if we want our kids to care about the great Christian truths and the depth that we have to offer them in the human experience, we really need to take it seriously that we have to demonstrate the reality of God. And I'll go to her and she can talk about this. Is it important that we have both answers, like apologetics answers, and a life that reflects the reality of God? If so, why is it important?
Absolutely it is, because you have to be a whole Christian. You have to be intellectual and emotionally intelligent, and you grow in that every day. But if you don't have the part that is good with people, that is living out what you know, then you come across as really hypocritical. And that's not just to younger people, that's to older people and the people you see every day. You can know everything about the Bible. No one does, but let's say you do. But if you don't live that way, and if you don't actually humble yourself to a point where you can learn from what you know or things you've learned in the past, then you're not doing anybody any favors. People will ignore you because why is your life better than theirs?
Can you explain what I was actually doing differently in our private life before I began to study apologetics?
For sure. You used to be a lot quicker to anger because you were dealing with so much inner turmoil that it came out on everyone else in your life. And so, being the only child, I got a lot of that wrath. And I call, there's a story we like to tell about when my mom started doing apologetics, and I told her, you just seem like you're a lot less petty. And back then I meant you're a lot less petty with your anger. You don't just simply get mad anymore. You actually explain to me why you were perturbed or why you're upset with something I did, and then I can respond in a like manner that actually fixes the problems and doesn't just let them keep on going. And also, you became a lot more easy to be friends with and to introduce my friends to, and not in an inappropriate parent-to-child friend way, where you weren't still mentoring me and I wasn't still learning from you, but in a way that I felt comfortable bringing my friends from school home and actually sitting down and talking to you. We had a secret code. Like, I knew when my atheist best friend couldn't take anymore, and I could just wink at you or throw the secret hand sign and say, that's too much, we're done for the day. We could trust each other because I felt that bond between us once you started really getting into your faith and being involved in the love of God.
All right. So, Roger. Yeah, that's you. I know it's late. You're tired. All right. So, what did you notice about our interactions prior to my study of apologetics and post, as I was still studying apologetics, but that's story.
It just seems like things started to relax around the house, whereas early on, before apologetics, we were striving. The shoulders are up, and we're always tense, and the day just becomes angry, and there's an atmosphere of just, wow, what's this all about? Then we started studying apologetics, and it just seems like it became more real, more incarnational, more loving, not just for our family, but for people that we came across in everyday life. We were actually interested in who they were, interested, even if they weren't a believer in God. That's interesting. So let's just talk about that and have conversations. So it's just relaxing to go, okay, this person doesn't believe like I do. Let's just have a conversation. So I think before apologetics, I was more like, oh, you don't know who Jesus is? Well, let me tell you who Jesus is, and admit, believe, confess your life. And it was always about making a transaction, a Jesus transaction, and trying to get them to get saved. That has its place in evangelism, but I think this is a lot more fun because you get to know the person and you get to watch them grow, and I think it's more natural that way. I think that's the way Jesus did it, and that's our example. So I think apologetics lowered our shoulders. It gave us more footing. It gave us more confidence. Yeah. And so then that way we could just have more natural conversations with each other and then also those that were around us.
Yeah, it really did affect our marriage a lot because when I was studying these apologetics arguments, like Emily mentioned, I'm using logic, right, and evidence and reason. So now, enter in my husband and I, we have a disagreement. Okay, so I can't spend my life saying, oh, I really, I use evidence and reason a lot, but I'm just going to yell at you, right? I can't do that anymore. So we would get into an argument, and I could feel the emotion going, and, that thing, we've been married for 24 years, so I'd be like, I know that you do this, and blah, blah, blah. And I would have to actually say, okay, wait a minute, what are we actually arguing about? And so we're not perfect right now. I mean, we still yell. We still get a good yell in
Who
there.
do you think's louder, her or me?
But what has changed is that in the past, I remember I would just let it go. Like, it was all up to my own desire and my will and on my whim. I could just go wherever I wanted to and however I felt. After I began to study about the reality of God, and I came to the point where I understood that God's real, I realized I'm accountable. I can't just do that. I actually have to try to figure out what the disagreement is, where we disagree, and see what we can do about it. Is there a solution to it? And that started to change our marriage. It really did, because I had to start bringing evidence and logic and reason into our marriage and our arguments. Wow, imagine that. We use it with atheists all the time, but it works right here. So, I started changing how I engage with you.
And our personalities are completely opposite from each other. So if you ever take those personality tests like Myers-Briggs or Enneagram or those type disc profiles, every time we take those tests, we have the complete opposite letters, or on opposite ends of the spectrum of the circle and whatnot. So when we approach something, it's always from the opposite side. We sometimes talk past each other, and we have to go, wait, we're probably saying the same thing, but we're not saying the same thing. So where are those connections? So apologetics helps us to just stop and reason through these arguments.
To reason. Like, if you think about it, a lot of us didn't get logic or critical thinking in school. And when I studied apologetics, it helped me to think logically. It helped me to think critically. And so now I can translate over that over into relationships with people. So instead of getting emotionally raw into these arguments, I can figure out, well, what are they trying to say? And what is their point? And we actually found out, like you said, we're trying to get to the same goal, but we're such opposite personalities that it sounds like we're talking right past each other. So it was another thing that happened. I had a person in the last time, on Tuesday when we gave this, they said, well, what was it? What was it that shifted in you? What happened? Tell me the connecting point. And I said, well, what shifted in me when I studied apologetics? So why did I change? What was the character change all about from studying apologetics? Because it's not magic, And I said, well, it was philosophy. It was a philosophy. It was a philosophical shift in my life. So I went from Christianity as being a checklist, and I was trying to make sure I'm checking all the right points. I'm not swearing. I'm reading my Bible. I'm trying to stay awake at night when I'm reading my Bible. I'm trying to have a quiet time. I'm trying to, spend time alone with God. There's the checklist. Boom, boom, boom. Oh, I'm a good Christian. It moved from that to catching a vision of what is good, true, and beautiful. There's a real God who made things good. Right? What he made was good. And we have gotten very far away from that. But catching a vision for, oh my goodness, I'm made for something better than this. There is something better than this. And I want that. I don't want to perpetuate this. I want a piece of that. I want to know what that is. When I caught that vision, God is real, and he's good, true, and beautiful, and I want to know what that means and how I can find it, and I want to see it in everything and figure out where I can get some of that in my life. That changed everything. That's when I started treating people in the household like they're human beings rather than, oh yeah, just that family member. That's when we started getting counterculture in our family relationships. That's why people think we're a weird family, because we don't act normal. We don't have normal family relationships. And by that, they mean fallen, sinful, depraved human relationships. We actually like each other. My daughter wants to come see us and bring her friends over. Oh my gosh, what's that all about? That's weird, right? She's a young 20-year-old, and one of her favorite things to do is to bring her group of friends over to our place so we can all talk and, play games and do stuff together. And that's supposed to be weird, and it's not. And that all came as a philosophical shift in my life and in your life as well. Did you want to?
Yeah, well, her friends are not all believers.
No.
And so that's been a constant theme.
Yeah, they're not.
So we have to put up with the occasional F-bomb and some other things that happen when they're just in natural conversation. We notice that they pull back when they come to our house, but they're still there, and we're still a safe place. They know who we are. They know our convictions, but we want them in our house because we want to affect their lives as well, and we want to see them come to Christ at some point.
Yeah, and Emily wants them in our house because she wants them to see our lives, and she wants us to affect them. And she actually told us one time, which was really sweet, she said, I want them to see a marriage that's okay. Because none of them have it in their lives. None of them have parents who have an okay marriage. And so I want them to see that this is possible. It's real. And they need to have, like, parents, basically. So we need to cultivate praxis if we want to be able to encourage a defense of the faith in the home. So let me give you one last Emily clip. She has 2 last things to say to you, and then we'll get a few more things. We'll wrap this up. I want to give you some resources as well that you can use with kids. Oh, there's your points. There's your 3. And then Emily. What can students do whose parents are not cultivating an interest in apologetics?
Okay. For me, they can do 2 things. They can go after their own interest in apologetics and see where that leads them. So they can take the initiative and not wait for someone else to push them to that. And they can follow their own interests and cultivate their life of the mind. And secondly, they can find that spiritual leader in their lives. It doesn't have to be that physical parent. Find that spiritual parent. Whether that's a pastor at your church or the guy that sells chicken feed down the road, whoever that is.
We don't know where that came
really
from.
Really find that person who's authentic and is very interesting to you and who is a love of, they love learning, that person that can mentor you. So whoever that is for you, find that spiritual parent.
Is there anything you want to leave with? We were laughing about chicken feed.
The great people of New Zealand.
Yes. Christianity is fun. Have fun. Don't be intellectual all the time. And don't be so, worried and concerned about whether you're doing things right to not have fun. Because what is life if you're not having a blast?
All right. Yeah, we were having a good time. We were like, where did chicken feed come from? We've always lived in the suburbs. We've never fed chickens in our lives. She had been watching the American sitcom Seinfeld, and apparently Kramer had a chicken.
Seinfeld, anybody?
Yeah, I don't know if you know that, but
good. So
one of the
Kramer,
main characters had a chicken, so that came up. All right, so let me share with you some resources for your kids. There are a couple of these that are being sold here at the conference, if you still have some. So the one on the far, what is that, your right? The far right, Cold Case Christianity for Kids by Jim Warner Wallace is awesome because Jim Wallace does this, he invites your kids along to be like a detective with him and to investigate the truths of Christianity. And there's an adult version of this book that tracks along with it. So you can read the adult version of the book while they're doing the kids' version. Awesome. He also has God's Crime Scene, in which it's a similar feel, and I think we have that one back there as well. The one next to it on your left, The Case for Christ for Kids, there's a bunch of those. The Case for Faith for Kids, The Case for a Creator for Kids. There's a whole series of those by Lee Strobel. So Lee Strobel, who wrote The Case for Christ, that would be there's another one where you could have the adult version, and then the kids version would be a good one to get. Natasha Crane's Keeping Your Kids on God's Side. Basically, she does 40 conversations you need to have with your kids. She has that one. These would all be for older kids, like ones who are, I'm going to guess maybe 8 and above, maybe 10 and above. But then you get on the bottom one there, on the bottom row, Dr. William Lane Craig, so one of the greatest Christian philosophers of our time, has done a children's book series called What is God Like? You can get all these on Amazon, by the way, or some of them back there. But what is God like? So he's going through the attributes of God for little bitty children, so picture book age children. And they're wonderfully done. And man, to teach the attributes of God so that when they're young, they're starting to learn who God is. You can have this conversation your whole life with them.
It's
right?
basically systematic theology for little kids.
In a picture book for under 5, right? Also, big thoughts for little thinkers. Start introducing them to having these big thoughts. Kids usually don't get their abstract thinking until they're about 11 or 12, around that age. So you want to start introducing them to some of these concepts when they're younger. By the time they get to their abstract thought, these things become more familiar. So these are like concrete ways to help kids think through abstract things. And then the last one there in the corner, Melissa Kane Travis does the Young Defenders series. Young Defenders. And so she has books like that one you can see there, like How Do I Know God's Really There? How Do I Know Jesus is Alive? Those kind of questions. So you can start with little kids on this. All right. Some practical helps. Please take pictures or do whatever you need to do there. These are great. I'm really excited that we have these because when I started doing apologetics, we didn't have resources for little kids. Barely had resources for teenagers, mostly in the homeschooling communities in America. So
let me add to that as well. These authors, you can find them all on Facebook. And so if you'll go look up their name or some of these books, you'll see them interacting online in groups on Facebook as well. So all of these authors are on there.
Yeah. All right, so let's wrap it up. We don't have to buy into cultural stereotypes of family relationships. And rather, we should not. As Christians, we should make a concerted effort to show the world that there is something unique and good and beautiful about a family of believers. We should have a type of like-mindedness, sameness of love, oneness in spirit, and humility towards each other that is utterly foreign to our culture. That's going to be hard, guys. I know we all come from different backgrounds. That's why I said this is not one size fits all. These are some of the ideas that we're trying to shoot for. When we practice authentic Christian love in our homes, we're going to begin to see that difference, including a sincere interest in the things of God. But all of these things have to be cultivated. We have to be intentional about doing these things. From parent to child, but if you are a student or you're the child, my daughter would say also from children to parents. Right? You also need to be proactive in cultivating interest with your parents and cultivating this love of learning and all that back and forth. It's give and take. None of the good things we've talked about will happen on their own. So it must be our desire. It has to be our desire to cultivate them, and then our obedience to practice them. And this is a tall task. But as you heard from Emily, it can be a hugely rewarding task. Hugely rewarding. So my challenge today is for you to find one thing that you can do in your homes now to encourage a defense of the faith. So what will you begin with today, and how can you have some fun?
We hope you enjoyed this presentation. Please consider supporting us to get more content just like this. Visit support.thinkingmatters.org.nz or click in the link in the description. If you really enjoyed this topic and would like to go further in depth, I would recommend purchasing the Cold Case Christianity Adult and Kids Bundle by J. Warner Wallace. This includes gripping stories from his career as a Los Angeles homicide detective and the visual techniques he developed in the courtroom. Wallace uses illustration to examine the powerful evidence that validates the claims of Christianity. We stock this bundle in our online store, which you can find a link to in the description.